Benjamin Tasker, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to find out more about the different roles you've played in AI now as an AI learning strategist. But before we get to that, would love to know a little bit more about you. Whereabouts did you grow up, and how did your upbringing help contribute to who you've become?
So I'm from New Hampshire. It's a very small state. Some people are probably shocked that an AI expert's coming from New Hampshire. It's mostly in the woods, but for my upbringing, so my mom is a cleaner. My dad delivers mail. For me, that really showed me learning curiosity. My dad was a Boy Scout. He went out and adventured a lot. We went fishing together. We went ice fishing. It's freezing in New Hampshire. My mom was very self-driven. She started her own businesses, worked for other businesses, more of an entrepreneurial mindset, so to speak. So for me, it was always about challenging the norm, but also finding new norms. And then in college, I thought I wanted to be a hospital administrator, which focuses on healthcare and patient volumes and all the things that I thought I liked. But there's a lot of data behind that. So I eventually got my bachelor's degree. I'm first generation college student. My parents really pushed me for that. The first project I got, which was really human focused on forecasting patient volumes for doctors' offices. I then left the hospital system and I went into education. I led a team for a community college system. I created an algorithm to help predict student success so we could deploy resources. Maybe that's additional financial aid if it was available. Maybe that's a tutor if that's available. Maybe that's just changing your course schedule and professor if that needed to happen.
So, you've shared a lot of different elements that I want to touch on briefly, Ben, because some of the examples you gave for AI use, even the early days when you got involved, are very relevant in people being able to visualize the use of AI. You mentioned healthcare and the data that you were capturing and the AI that you were using in healthcare. One of the challenges that I find people see is that they see generative AI and they see the power of it and they're like, oh my God, it's incredible. But then they have experiences like I had last week taking my mom to the doctors. There were like 18 different pieces of paper we still had to fill out. And I highly doubt these data points contribute to any future insight. It's just a lot of regulation. In most organizations, there is a lot of data, but much of the data is similar to the doctor's office that I took my mom to last week, where it's in little pieces of paper, it's in different databases.
Data is the oil of any AI algorithm. So before we even thought about how are we going to forecast this or what weights we're going to use, what feeds into this, we had to make sure that we had the basis of the data. But for these patients, they're oncology patients, so cancer patients. So there's a ton of data on these folks' labs. They come in frequently. If they're going to an offsite treatment center, that's all data. There's waveform data. So there wasn't a lack of data in that sense. We actually had too much data. So how did we want to try to find populations to help target those individuals that don't even know that they're probably prone to cancer to help get them in for screening? So the way I approached this was that I mapped out our cancer patients. So taking the data points and putting them on a physical map. And then even though this is a little bit more manual, allowed me to visualize where the patients were coming from. So this was in rural Maine, or most of the patients coming in were from rural Maine. Interesting. Okay, that's correlation, not causation. But you drill down. Okay, so now we have a team of oncologists. We're in a room together. We're looking at the data, drilling down. And one of the oncologists says, one thing that in common here, that a data point we don't have, is that most of these individuals are drinking from well water. And here's a whole bunch of studies that show if you don't get it cleaned properly, if you don't get it pumped frequently, if you're not filtering it, all these components that go into if those things are skipped or not done, there's a high likelihood that you could get stomach cancer. Let's see our stomach cancer rate. And there's different types of stomach cancer, but we did it generally. And it was 1.5 times higher than the national average, which is huge. So then it was like, oh my gosh, how do we get these people in here? Can we take some grants to get them in for screening? How do we encourage them to clean their wells? Is there some sort of funding for that? It became like exactly what I was trying to explain, a public health campaign. But when you're in there as a data scientist looking at the drill down data, and working with the oncologist to figure out the problem, that never really came to mind, but it was much more serious than what we anticipated.
What a powerful example, Ben. I love it for so many different reasons. This is a beautiful example of how, through the use of data, you can change the scope of healthcare, where a lot of times healthcare, primarily the way we viewed it, especially here in the US, is once someone has an issue or a problem, let's work to address that issue or problem. They get a cancer, we do the best job in the world in treating that cancer. Through the use of data and analysis, you were able to predict what are potential contributors to certain cancers, and therefore what can we do to avoid that from happening. So that's a great example of the predictive power of AI in healthcare. Now, you mentioned you also did quite a bit of this in education.
Changing the word from patient to student. Instead of looking at health factors, we're looking at student success factors and persistent factors. So persistence is when you enroll into an educational program, doesn't matter if it's college or university, you just go one course to the next. And based upon that average, it takes about 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, 5 to 6 years, depending on the master's, depending on the PhD, a little bit more than that. But that's on average the pace in which students graduate. And then are these students remote? Are they hybrid? What program are they in? What's the dropout rate for the specific program in the specific state in the region? How can we compare ourselves? So it was taking all the data that you can get from a student clearinghouse, boiling it down. What's their background, demographics? What professor do they have? It sounds silly, but one professor might have a higher likelihood of success for a particular student that might fail the same course with a different faculty member. You should just put them in the other section. Basic things like that really increase persistence. By increasing persistence, you increase your success rate.
So those are two powerful examples, Ben, of application of AI and data science in organizations. This can be of value across industries in all organizations. What are the barriers to helping organizations tap into this power of data and AI in predicting ahead of time where they need to focus their effort on and what the success factors will be, whether with health outcomes or student outcomes or whatever else the organization is focused in on?
The reason why I went into those examples is because I think it's the complexity around the data. Either it's right at your fingertips and you have a lot of it, but it's hard for you to define the problem and visualize it all, or you don't have enough of it. I think people are getting a little bit excited about AI, where they don't even really have a data strategy, let alone an AI strategy. They're like, I just want this AI thing. Let's roll the dice and see how it goes. They hear all these news stories. Microsoft, for examples, 30% of their code now is written by AI or an AI agent. I don't even know if individuals know what that means, but they're like, I got to do this at my company. We got to stay ahead. Again, they don't even have that oil figured out. So the car's not going to drive without the oil, but they just make the rash decision. And then once you make that decision, once you're in, if you pick a bad algorithm, if you collect bad data, that stuff stays around forever. Even if you do implement the AI, if it has bad data, it's going to make bad decisions.
That's an outstanding point where people are looking at the outcomes or the end results, not focusing as much effort on the data that goes into it that determines the quality of those outcomes and those end results. Now, we are going through a transformation with respect to learning and our need to upskill as well. Would love to get your thoughts, Ben, on one, why you focused on upskilling and what executives need to keep in mind with respect to upskilling as we're going through this transformation and the use of AI.
So the education system in current time takes a lot of, not to make a pun, but takes a lot of time to get through. 4 years, probably at the minimum. I know there's associate's degrees and stuff, but to get a degree, most want a bachelor's. Then you have to take out a large loan to do that. So there's a large financial barrier now, and it just keeps escalating. Now with AI being introduced, There's a lot of talk around whether what's being taught in the universities is still relevant by the time these individuals leave the university. So now the universities are like, oh no, like we have an enrollment cliff coming. And now there's this AI upskilling, reskilling thing. What do we do? So one way to do that is to focus on short form learning. So a lot of individuals call that badges or certificates. Another way to think about it is I like to think about it like currency. So you go and learn something really quick, and by 6 weeks at the max, you collect that currency. It's like coins. The coins go into a piggy bank, and then over time, the piggy bank fills up. And then you can trade those coins that you collected in for a degree at the end of the day. But it's more of an ecosystem than a separate approach. And workforce is over here, and education is to the left or to the right, wherever it may be. It's now more of a circle. So I might go and get the micro credential for a little bit. Then I might go take on a project back at my company. Let's pretend I did something in project management. I get mentored or I lead a project with another project manager that's experienced. Now I'm getting hands-on experience. I'm learning from someone that actually does that role. So I'm validating my skills, right? So in order to be able to prove that you can do something well, which is what a skill is, you have to validate it. So that's the validation. Okay, so now I can project manage. I can add that skill to my profile, so to speak. So to answer your question, the upskilling, reskilling dilemma, I think is a factor of education really not being able to adapt to this AI concept, and then workforce trying to adapt to it so quickly. And it just compounds and it's shortening the time in which people have to learn things. And it's increasing the number of relevant skills that you need to do a job.
Couple of questions and thoughts before going into the specific skills. One is some in education see the AI revolution similar to use of computers or the internet, in that all education had to do was, instead of people taking notes on pieces of paper, they would take notes on their computer. And instead of going to the library to do their research, they would use the internet to do research. But the basic framework of education didn't change. Why do you think AI will impact that basic framework of education and not just become another tool that, as people are going to classes, they have their AI companion or AI agent who's working with them and along with them, but in the same basic structure and system we currently have?
This is just my summary of the current system, but I think it's very time based. It's bound by time. All the metrics are time based. The time you get to your next course, the time you get to your diploma, everything's time. With AI, it really shortens that amount of time because it can disseminate everything on the internet or anything that's text. Think about how these models are built. It just takes all the input that it could possibly get. It stores it into a database, a table. And then when you interact with it based upon personalization and all the other factors that go into that interaction, it gives you information. Outside of time, think about what a university is. Teachers disseminated information. I know some of the greatest people in my life are either a coach or a teacher. When I think of the three most impactful people in my life, it's definitely one of those two job categories. So I'm not trying to diminish any of that, but it's just how the American education system worked. You either went in, you took some notes, you took a quiz, maybe you wrote a paper, you took a final exam. That's all, again, text-based, right? So I think universities have to adapt, and not just universities, but the education system as a whole has to adapt how they assess students, which is why I'm trying to emphasize more of the competency-based approach, making sure you validate your skills, your ability to do something. So if I say I can project manage, that's validated by me working on a project and running it from front to back. That's a skill. You can validate that. You have something to show for that. Not saying the diploma is not valuable. I actually think with AI, education is going to become more accessible. It's going to help lower the cost. It's going to help people learn things faster. The time to get these degrees and certifications is going to take less time. So that also helps lower the cost. It's just going to change the ecosystem. I still think there's going to be faculty members because humans like to learn from humans. So it's not doom and gloom.
I couldn't agree with you more. I still think there are a lot of sticky elements in the system. both in healthcare and in education. There are lots of rules, regulations, expectations, lots of people who drag their feet, kicking and screaming, saying we need to keep things the way they have been. I think AI will be the kind of force that will shift whether they want it or not. Now, you've also repeatedly mentioned a skills based focus and would love to know as we transition into this age of AI, let's call it, where access to knowledge and information, in essence, is free. We have the smartest colleagues we could ever want to have. And pretty soon, I think we will have AI agents trained on much of our content as well. So our AI agent can interact and get whatever information we need. Therefore, what skills, competencies, capabilities do you think will become more critical at this time when AI becomes so powerful and capable in doing a lot of the knowledge work that traditionally was assigned to humans?
There's a lot of different skills frameworks out there or guides to label skills. So I just want listeners to understand that. The one I'm about to talk about is from the World Economic Forum. And the reason why I like that one so much is because it's very simple. They categorize skills by AI skills. And those are the skills that AI either already is good at or going to get even better at. Assistance thinking, analytical thinking, prompt engineering, coding. Technically, those are the technical skills or the STEM skills, however you want to label that. It's very interesting that they call them AI skills. The other set of skills are called human skills. They're mostly uniquely human, even though AI can impersonate the skills. It's really hard for AI to pull them off, at least authentically. And that's communication, leadership, empathy, being able to have conversation with our peers. We don't really directly teach that. And I think it's because it's hard to teach because of everyone's individual perspective. But imagine having to go through a 6-week course, learning how to have difficult conversations and setting up mindfulness sessions. It sounds a little out there, but I think that's exactly where society's headed because we're going to have more time on our hands to be able to explore those avenues.
So, what makes you believe that these are the things that will differentiate the human employees from AI that's becoming really good at that, at mimicking it? I agree with you. AI doesn't have empathy, but it's mimicking it. So, when we want a doctor to respond to us, we want the doctor to have the world's knowledge, these AIs do, and we want the doctor to have some empathy. And it seems like these AIs have as much, if not more, empathy or convey it than humans. What are your thoughts about that?
So before we get into the question, in 2024, there was a study by Harvard Business School that ranked some of the most likely use cases with AI. Up there was generating ideas. Therapy was number 2. Education was a little bit lower, troubleshooting. A lot of that's not surprising. But what is surprising in 2025 is that therapy and companionship, empathy, jumped to number 1. Organizing my life is number 2. Finding purpose, that was interesting. That could also be companionship, but that's separate. So there must be a separate use case. That's 3. Education is 4. And creativity from 27th to 9th. People are using this to create art and run Etsy stores and whatever else the case may be. Very cool. So a lot of those are move away from coding AI skills to human skills. But what is AI? It's personalized and it's a recommendation system. So it takes interactions from the billions of people using it and it provides a recommendation output that it thinks that you want to see. Then I read it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is really empathetic. But I think it's because, at least from a human standpoint, we're not getting that from society right now, or we're not getting it as much right now. It's something that I think we're really overlooking. So when I see it or I read it or I can solve what I consider a more complex problem, even though I could do that in my head, but I know I'm reading it. So it satisfies some of those urges, right? Because it's on demand. You can access this 24/7. I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm going to go to this for all my problems, or I'm going to start having more advanced relationships with this. Some individuals are dating AI. Like, what? No one, I don't think in 2022 we talk about dating AI in 2025, but folks are doing it. So that means it's really great at companionship. But what are you getting out of that? They know that AI is not real, right? It's just giving you back what you think you want to see. I think we're going to have what I call an uh-oh moment or a realization moment. We were almost there, or I thought we were almost there, when Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was impersonated, but that one kind of died off. But imagine a more prominent actor, a US president, another head of another country being impersonated with semi-decent AI. That could, be a catastrophe. And maybe we're not going to be interacting with it as much. Maybe we're like, oh, maybe this isn't as safe or as cool as I thought. And we haven't really had that yet, but we will have it. And that will lead humans to trusting humans again.
I love both of the points that you highlighted there, Ben. One, the latter point that you mentioned, is awareness of the risks associated with it. I think people don't fully grasp that. And there are going to be implications of it for individuals, for organizations, and for society. Secondarily, back to the empathy issue, I mentioned the visit with my mom last week. Yesterday, I took my daughter for her annual physical, and it is incredible because I also mentioned to her doctor, she is amazing. She did have an AI recording tool, but she was fully focused and present with my daughter. It was beautiful seeing the connection and the empathy. So, one of the things we haven't focused in on as humans, including with doctors, has been on that empathy. Doctors have been rewarded on knowing the answers. Now, AI knows the answers better than most doctors do in most instances. Therefore, maybe it gets us to focus on training ourselves on those human skills that you talk about, such as empathy, and prioritizing those. So going to a doctor's visit ends up being different. It's not for the doctor to look you in the eye for 10 minutes and say, this is what I prescribe. Now go out. It's focusing in on, with empathy, listening to you, and then having all the AI knowledge in the world augmenting that doctor's insights.
Absolutely. And I think the other beautiful part of this, I know you're just talking about medicine, but back to creativity. Even though AI can produce art and there's probably going to be mass production of that, imagine your favorite piece of art, whatever that is, picture that in your head. I don't think you can take away from that beauty of whatever that famous piece of art is. And actually becomes more beautiful, right? Because someone had to create it.
So I would love to get your thoughts also, Ben. Most of the listeners to the podcast are CEOs, senior level executives, managers in organizations. They're not at the beginning of their career, they're typically mid to later on in their professional careers. They have experienced some success. What advice would you have to them on their need to reskill, upskill as we go through this transformative wave?
It's really old school, but creating that plan, the learning plan, you can work with AI to develop what you think you're really good at. And the key there is what you think you're really good at, not what AI thinks you're really good at. Getting some feedback on those skills, maybe from a mentor. AI is really honest, but it's still going to tell you what you want to hear. So make sure it's a little bit more critical. But then once you understand what you are good at, really setting a plan where you want to go, and then focusing on those skills that you need to develop. So for example, for myself, I'm focusing on communications, doing these podcasts to help be able to communicate complex ideas. That's me validating the skill. So it doesn't have to be in the classroom. Is the example I'm trying to make. It can be taking on a project. I found podcasts fun, so you could do something fun, but it can be fun. It doesn't really have to be that skills based, like I'm focusing on communication. But if you want to focus on companionship, therapy, mindfulness, so it's experiencing new things, acquiring new skills, and then working that plan and actually writing it down, not type it out, physically take a notebook and a pen, write out, I want to be able to do this in this amount of time. This is how I'm going to get there. These are the people I'm going to work with, and then executing the plan. You're 76% more likely to do it if you write it down.
Now, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of other things before we wrap up, Ben. I find that there are some people who are AI evangelists, and in essence, the world is going to be beautiful, perfect. We're all going to live 500 years. Wait another 10 years, we'll live that long, and there will be AI robots running around taking care of us. And then there are the doomers that say, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. No one is going to have a job. AI is going to take over. Now, from your perspective, what do you think the AI evangelists and then on the other side, the AI doomers get wrong? What is your balanced perspective on where we will be as a society and with our organizations 3 or 5 years from now?
I consider this the between time. So we're not fully in the future yet, but we're not really out of the past. We're still figuring this out. We are going to have that AI moment. That's going to change the speed in which this adoption occurs. It's also going to change projections. Right now, society's already generating jobs from AI, jobs that didn't exist. Prompt engineering is one of them. We also have a huge surplus of jobs teaching, firefighting, police officers, a lot of things in medicine that a lot of individuals don't go and get a job in because it's sometimes too complex, it costs too much, it's overlooked in society. Now those jobs might become available. So they're more human-centered jobs. So there are avenues for it. I think that we're going to keep trying to embed this AI tool or this AI application into all aspects of life. It's going to get messed up at some point, and then we're going to have to scale it back.
We don't necessarily know the timing, but we do know the directionality. And you've called this a once in a generation reset. And it could even be a once in humanity reset. What is the biggest advice you would have for the podcast listeners after they finish this conversation? What do you want them to think differently or do differently as a result of this conversation, Ben?
In this between times, I think change is going to happen very quickly. AI is also really great at creating opportunity. You can start businesses easier with it. You can invest into yourself. So if you're a lawyer, for example, it might be easier for you to start your own law firm with an AI agent and do contract review or whatever the case may be than not doing anything or having skill. So just by learning a little bit throughout your journey through this between times is really beneficial.
It is. And one of the reasons I enjoy these conversations, Ben, is that these are great times for us to keep learning and relearning as we go through this acceleration, in part as a result of AI. So if the audience wants to follow you, your work, where would you send them to, Ben?
My website, bentaskerai.com, or my LinkedIn, Ben Tasker. I have other posts there. If you need your own custom learning plan, my website's a great place to look as well.
Outstanding. I really appreciate the conversation and your insights. Thank you for joining me, Benjamin Tasker.
Thank you for having me.